Okay. Remember, we always work with the big zeros if there's adding and subtracting that needs to be handled first. And then we have our big ones at the end to get the variable by itself. Okay. And we have our balance line. Okay. We have our balance lines. So I'm going to go stick all my balance lines in so I don't have to think about it in a minute. So why don't you go do that as well? Go put your balance lines in. Okay. So like I said, we work with big zeros if we're trying to clear out an addition or subtraction. We work with our big ones when we're trying to clear out our multiplying and dividing. Okay, big zeros for adding and subtracting, big ones for multiplying and dividing. Okay, put on our equation editor after we go to our text box for our name. Okay, so put your name and your period. I don't care about the date. Okay, the equation editor is the one that's the most helpful. Okay, now we need to look at this problem. We need to get the part with the variable by itself. We need to get the part with the variable by itself. I have 2 people in danger of being removed from Zoom and marked absent if you do not respond and get your cameras on. So read your private messages and get it handled. So on number 1, yes, I see an addition or subtraction right here at the top of the fraction. Problem is, I have this divided by 5. I have to undo that divide by 5. I have to undo that divide by 5. So I have to do a big one first in this situation because I have this divide by here. Okay. Because I have that divide by there. Come on, guys, you know you should be in your camera so I can see your eyes. So what's the opposite of dividing by 5? What's the opposite of dividing by 5? Multiplying by 5. So I'm going to multiply on the left side by 5. And I'm going to multiply by 5 on the right side. So let me rewrite that differently though. This is just too confusing this way. So I'm going to have a 5 that I multiply the whole fraction by, 4 minus y, highlight it, divided by 5, get off it parentheses. Okay. And that has, we're going to do the other side, that's going to be equal to a 5 times a 12. Okay. So whenever we have a fraction that we're dealing with that's on the bottom first, let's do that. That makes it a little better, right? We have to undo that fraction. We have to undo the fraction first. Because my variable's on the top of a fraction, I have to undo that fraction first. Okay, undo that fraction first. So we're going to go do the math. This divided by 5 became a big 1 with the multiply by 5. Because remember, when you multiply, and that's a 5 on the top and that's a 5 on the bottom, so they canceled out. So we have a 4 minus y left on the left-hand side. And then we go do the math for the right-hand side. The 12 times the 5 makes what? What's a 12 times a 5? $60. Okay. Let me write it. Now, oops, that's a 5, that's a 60. Now we can go ahead and do our big zero because we have an adding and subtracting only with the letter. Okay, and adding and subtracting only with the letter. So how do we big zero that 4? So we first had to, let me highlight so we could see what happened. First, we had to deal with this 5 on the bottom by doing a big 1. Now we're dealing with this 4. It's a positive 4. We need to big zero it away. So what are we going to do to big zero away a 4? Yeah, we go ahead and subtract a 4 from both sides because this is positive 4, right? When we don't have a symbol in front, we know it's positive. So to undo a positive 4, we have to subtract 4. Whatever we do to one side of the balance beam, we have to do to the other. Right? So we now have big zeroed that 4. Oh, gone. What's left on this left-hand side? Now that we've big zeroed. What's left? I do know, just like yesterday, some of you have to close the worksheet, close the Google Classroom, reopen the Google Classroom, reopen the worksheet for Cami to finally register for you. Okay. Okay, so what's left on the left-hand side? What's still there? After we big zeroed that 4 out of there, what's left on that left-hand side? A negative y, exactly. So this says negative y equals 60, right? No, 60 minus 4. How much? $60 minus 4, 56. Now, is that y completely and totally alone? Is that y completely and totally alone? No. There's something with the y. What's with the y that we know is there but do not see it because multiplying by it doesn't really show up? What's there? The 1, but it's not just a 1. It's what kind of 1? A negative 1. Exactly. So we have a negative 1 that we need to big 1 out of there because it's multiplying by that y. This big 1, that negative 1, is multiplying by the y because we know as soon as we see a y, there's technically 1 of them, right? So if you want to write it as a negative 1y to remind you, go ahead. It's okay. How do we get rid of, by big 1, that -1? How do we get rid of that big 1? We have to big 1, that -1 out of there. Divide by -1. So whatever you see in front of the letter member is what you're dividing by. So I'm going to move to here because I don't have space. So I have a -1y that is being divided by a -1. And that is going to equal a 56 that's being divided by a -1. I have now big 1 out that -1. All gone. I only have the y left. But the y is going to equal to what now? What is the y going to be equal to now? What is the y going to be equal to now? 56 divided by -1. What do we get? What's 56 divided by -1? No, 56 divided by -1. So what do we think? -56, yes. No, I'm done. I'm doing this trick. It's prettier looking. Okay. So we're going to do that again on 2B because see, it's the same type of problem. So I want to focus on a skill at first. Okay, so we're going to do 2B. Same process we just got done with. Okay. So in 1A, what did I do first? We're going to do the same thing for this one, but instead, we're going to be working with this 10. So look at what we did in the 1A. We're doing the same process. So what did I do first in 1A? What process? We're going to multiply both sides by that 10. Exactly. One moment. My highlighter got crazy. Okay. Because I have this 10 on the bottom, I have to get rid of that with the big 1. Okay, so I have to multiply both sides by the 10. So I have a 10 times the whole thing, 12 minus t, highlight that, say divided by 10. That's how it all fits. And that's going to equal to the 10 times the 7. Okay, that's going to big 1, that 10 on the bottom out of there. That's going to big 1, this 10 on the bottom out of here. Nope, not a circle, 9. Because we don't want him there. He's in the way. That's just going to leave us with a 12 minus t equaling, what is the left side equal? I mean, right side equal. Do the math for the right-hand side. Yep, 7. All right, we now have something basic. We need to big 1, this 12 out of there. How are we gonna, no, big 0, because it's adding and subtracting. Big 0, that 12 out of there. So what are we gonna do? Big 0. Subtract 12 from both sides. From the left side, 12, so it becomes 0. From the right side, because whatever you do to the left, you have to do to the right to keep the balance going. You have to stay in balance. That's what this balance line is for. to keep it in balance. Okay, so we big zeroed out of there the 12. What's left on that side? What's left on that side? What's left on that side? We got rid of the 12. What was left? Negative t. And let's write it the other way, negative 1t, to remind us that there is a number in front of that t, right? Negative 1t has to equal 70, take 12 away. What are we going to do? 70, take 12 away. 58. Okay. Is it done? Is the t totally by itself? No. So what's our next step going to be? Thought I move up over on the side because it's in the way. What's our next step going to be then? To get the t all by itself. So we need to big 1 that negative 1 out of there. Remember, big 0 is for adding and subtracting because we want to turn it into 0. Big 1 is for multiplying and dividing because we want to divide by the same number to get a 1, because 1 times things doesn't matter, right? So negative 1t divided by negative 1 has to equal 58 divided by negative 1. That big 1 out, all gone for this negative 1, because negative 1 divided by negative 1, positive 1. When we multiply times 1, it changes nothing. So t is all that's left. What is our t going to be equal to? T is all that's left. What is our t going to be equal to? Negative 58. Okay. All right. So that's t equals negative 58. 3b is the same thing, right? 3b is the same thing. So we're going to do 3b. We're just getting in practice and doing the ones that are similar first. Okay. Someone tell me, what would be my first step? Because I have the 6 down here. What would be my first step? Because of that 6 down there. Multiply both sides by 6. We have to big 1 that 6 out of there because the part with the letters on the top. Okay. So we have to multiply both sides by 6. So that means I have a 6 times the 7 that was already there, having to equal the 12a divided by the 6. And then I'm going to put a parentheses around that. One more. Right again. And that has to multiply by the 6 as well. And then I'll shift it around. Okay, that makes that 6 that was with the variable gone. Gone, gone, because 6 divided by 6 is 1, and anything times 1 doesn't matter, right? Okay, so what's the right side going to say? What's the left side going to say? Tell me what it's going to say now that we fixed it. What's the whole thing going to say? Do the math. Tell me what it's going to say now that that 6 is out of there. 42 equals what? I want the whole thing. Yep. 42 equals 12a. All right. So we need to big one again, because I have this 12 with the a, and I want it to go away. What am I going to do to get that 12 out of there? What are we going to do to get that 12 out of there? Divide both sides by 12. Exactly. Exactly. Nice. So the 42 is going to divide by 12. Oops, why did I do the wrong thing? Oh, let me go erase it. Highlighter crazy. Okay. The 42 divides by 12. And it has to equal the 12a. Forgot to arrow off. Divided by 12 has to equal, we'll figure out how to fix this, 12a divided by 12. Okay. So now we have to look at the a is now alone because the 12s are gone. We big one those, right? That is now done, right? So this side says a. Remember, we always do our answers with our letters on our left-hand side. So we're going to say our a first. Okay, I'm going to say our a first. We're getting our final answer. Now we have a 42 divided by 12. Does it go in evenly? Does 42 divide evenly by 12? No. So we're going to have to reduce, we're going to have to simplify the fraction by dividing both sides, both parts, 42 and the 12 have to divide by the same number. Remember the divides in the symbols over here. Have to divide by the same number. So it simplifies our fraction to simplest form. So what can 42 and 12 both be divided by? What can 42 and 12 both be divided by? Think of the biggest number that can divide into 42 and into 12. Think of the biggest number that can divide into 42 and 12? Yes, 6. Now, I do know that 2 would go into both of them. Yes, because they're even numbers. And I do know that 3 goes into both of them. And the way we know is because 4 plus 2 makes 6. That divides by 3. 2 plus 1 makes 3. That divides by 3. So both were able to be divided by 2 and 3 at the same time. So 6 is the number we want. That is how numbers work. I multiply the factors together. Okay, so I have an A that's going to equal the fraction. If I do 42 divided by 6, what do I get? Kevin, I should see you. If I do 42 divided by 6, I get 7. And if I do 12 divided by 6, I get what? 2. And we leave it like that. We leave it as an improper fraction. A simplified improper fraction, but an improper fraction. We're not going for decimals. We're not practicing decimals right now. We're just getting it as simple as we can. Okay, so on your worksheet that you're going to have to do, when you see a fraction with the entire letter piece at the top and a number at the bottom, you're going to first do a big 1 to get that bottom out of there. Then you go do your normal process. Okay. Now we're just going to work on basic ones. Look, back to simple basic ones. Back to simple basic ones. We have to big 0 this 4 out of here. How are we going to big 0 the 4 out of there? Yep, subtract 4 from both sides. So subtract 4 from the 10 side. Subtract 4 from the 4. Because the goal is to make a big 0 and 4 minus 4 makes 0, right? That's gone. Now we have to go ahead and solve what this 10 minus 4 is equal to. What's that 10 minus 4 equal to? What's that 10 minus 4 equal to? 6. What's on the right-hand side, though, after we get rid of that 4? What's left? Negative 5b, exactly. Okay. Negative 5b. Negative 5b. All right. Have we handled all the addition and subtraction? Yes. So now we get to go to our big ones. We have to big 1 away, a negative 5. So what are we going to do? To big 1 away, negative 5. Divide both sides by negative 5, exactly. So I have a 6 that's being divided by a negative 5. Let me move it over, it got too far. Arrows out, and it's going to equal a negative 5b divided by a negative 5. Okay. I've now zeroed out. I've one'd out, big one'd out this negative 5. And I've got my answer, right? Because 6 doesn't divide evenly by negative 5. So my answer is going to be B equals negative 6 divided by 5. Okay. Questions about that one? That was back to a basic one. We did a lot of those last semester. Before break. Okay, here we go again. We need to big zero a negative 6 out of there. What are we going to do? We need to big zero that negative 6. Add 6 to both sides, yes. Add 6 to both sides, yes. So, I'm going to add 6 to the 12 side. And I have to add 6 to the negative 6, so it becomes 0. That's the whole point, big 0, make it into 0. What do I have to do to the number that's with the letter to turn it into 0? And I do the big zeros because I see that subtraction sign. Okay, I do the 0 because I see the subtraction sign. Oops, right, I did one thing. When I see adding or subtracting, I have to do the big 0. If I'm multiplying or dividing, I do the big 1. Okay, what's the left side say? What's the left side say? $18. What's the right side say? 18 is going to equal what? 8x. Exactly. Okay. Have I handled all the adding and subtracting? Yes. So now I'm going to big 1. This 8 out of here. How am I going to big 1? That 8 out of there. How am I going to big 1? Divide 8 on both sides. Okay. So I'm going to show dividing by 8. So I have my 18. That's going to divide by 8, and it has to equal my 8x divided by 8. Stop it. It's a problem. You have to make sure you arrow before you hit the divide sign. 8x divided by 8. Okay. Does 8 divide into 18 evenly? We have big 0 it out, big 1 out this 8, right? Does 18 go evenly into 8? Does 18 go evenly into 8? No. So we have to do the divide stuff. 18 divided by what? And 8 divided by what? So we can simplify our fraction. What do both of them divide by? Does 18 divide by 4? No, so we have to go with the 2. Sometimes we have to go with the simplest one that we have, okay? Because that's as good as it's gonna get. So this says that my x equals 18 divided by 2. And 8 divided by 2. So what are we gonna get? Do the math. 18 divided by 2. What do you get? 8 divided by 2. What do you get? 9 over 4. Okay. Great news is you're going to have plenty of time to start your assignment in class today. All right. What happens first? Are we going to big 0 first, or are we going to big 1 first? We're going to big 0 first because we see addition and subtraction. How are we going to big 0? How are we going to subtract the 9 from both sides? Yes, because I see this positive 9 in the way. And the way we get rid of positive 9 is negative 9, right? So subtract 9 from the left side. I'm going to copy it and subtract it, do it on the right side. Remember, you can copy and paste to work smart, not hard. That makes that a big 0, right? So that's all gone. What's left on that left-hand side once that's all gone? Negative 11W. Exactly. What's on left on the right-hand side? What's left on the right-hand side? Negative 2. Exactly. Because seven and negative 9, not the same sign. So we had to subtract and keep the sign on the bigger one, which was a negative. Okay, 1 second. All right. Someone had fallen out of Zoom, so I had to let them back in. Welcome back. No worries. So I have a negative 11W, and it's going to equal a negative 2 because the 7 and the 9 were not the same sign. Subtract and the sign for the bigger one. Okay, have we handled all adding and subtracting? Have we handled all that? Have we handled all the adding and subtracting? Yes. So now we're going to big 1. We're going to do the multiply and divide. We need to get that W alone. We need to big 1 out this negative 11. What are we going to do to make that negative 11 go away by division? Big 1. Divide both sides by negative 11, exactly. So I have negative 11W that's being divided by, oops, I forgot to highlight. Whenever you want it to go on the top level, you have to highlight the whole thing, divided by the negative 11, because we need it in both places, the negative. And then we have a negative 2 that's being divided by the negative 11, okay? It will automatically assume that there's only one negative needed. We needed 2. The one for the negative 11 on the top and bottom. Okay, so I have now successfully big one the negative 11 away from the W. And I have only W left. And then I look at the right-hand side. How can that be simplified? How can the right-hand side be simplified? How can the right-hand side be simplified? What do they both have that we can make go away? Because they cancel each other out. On the left, on the right-hand side. What do both levels have that we can cancel out? On the right-hand side. The negative 2 and the negative 11 both have what? The negative 2 and the negative 11 both have what? That we can cancel out. Negative. Basically, these negative ones are getting canceled out together. So the negatives went away as well. So what this is going to say W equals what? W equals what then, if those negatives got canceled out? 2 11s. 2, oops, right at the wrong spot. 2 divided by 11. Okay. So is it a big deal that they're not whole numbers? No. All we're going to do is simplest form fractions. I have a couple of people I sent private messages to that they need to be responding to me quickly. Okay. Questions about that? Any questions about that? Any questions about that? Okay, so turn in your notes. I'll leave them up on the screen for the people that had a little bit of glitch at the beginning. And I'll actually make it a little smaller so that you can see all of the problems at once. Because I do know some people had some slow Cami start. For some reason, Cami was arguing. Okay, So you are to turn this in if you are finished with it. Okay. If you are not finished with it, there it is, all of it there. Make sure you get it done and get it turned in. If you are finished, you start your homework assignment in class right now, and we stay in Zoom and you ask me questions. Class is over at 10:40. Perfect amount of time for you guys to get going. Some of you might even finish before class is over and have no homework tonight except for Delta Math. I notice some of you have not started your Delta Math yet. That's not the best choice. It'll leave too much for you later. Now, just to let you know, if you turn in notes blank, you get a 0. If you turn in a homework assignment blank, it gets returned to you and you will have to do it one way or another. But come June 6th, it turns into a 0. If for this half of the class, you get a C or better, you get to move on because this works and builds on last semester. So if you can get a C in the harder stuff, they feel that you've gotten good enough to move on in your math. But if you don't get a C or better in this one and didn't get a C or better in the first half, you retake high school math for the whole year next year. I don't recommend that. You would take high school math A, which takes the first half of the year, and high school math B, which takes the second half of the year. Okay, so you are to be working in Zoom on your homework assignment, or you are in Zoom working on getting these notes